Hello, my name is TC, and in my last two videos of Contactless, I wanted to dissect first the board at play in which the psychological, I want to say manipulation of emotional behavior is not only convincing many to be lost in their own ways, but that the real threat is that of authority who is not only decaying, but is trying to get every last effort to make sure that they remain in power no matter what. And if this is a decaying system of a power struggle, then we're witnessing not only the collective backlash of it, but we're not only entertaining its value, but we're ushering in the world that is being pushed. Whether we accept that or not is up to the individual power, which was dissected in the last and second video of this Contactless series. So if we are the individuals who can construct that power, what can we do? What freedoms are in our nature that we can apply solutions based off our own efforts, our own thoughts, and our own locality so that we ourselves offer new opportunity rather than limiting to what we're being told is the case. So I like to bring this in by recognizing that each of us are our own body. And if we are our own aspect of self, then we can contribute and be our own. It is a node, so to say. And with any network, nodes connect one another. And when you have enough nodes, you build a network so huge that the network itself is interconnected. It's fractal. It's the mycelium that holds everything together almost. So when you're dealing with the idea of the body and the node, we are able to emit, but we're also receptive. So when we choose to allow ourselves to emit something that we've already picked up, that is our responsibility that we're choosing to. We don't pick up the song and then hum it out loud by choice. It is more subconscious habits that allow that to take place. And whether it's entrained into us or it's something that is subconscious, that we can still work with it and overcome whatever it is that we are actually processing or going through. That is one of the beauties of being human and having the ability to recognize the I am. So with that the case, if we are the nodes of a network, then that network is of a social nature. And I'm not talking about the social networks that we see online because these are more just platforms that individuals and companies have created and thus also limited based off their business models and what they choose to do with it. It is their own, and just like the opinions of others, it is their own to create it what it is, even if that system may be seen as the most commonplace people can gather to, or whether it's the most ease of convenience. What you give your power away towards is up to the individual always. And these individuals are continuing to give power away to a platform. But are we giving it away to the platform, or are we making good use of the tools and resources around us to try to build the network? Because that is inherently part of our nature, that we want to try to connect. And no matter what measures of manipulation, algorithmic adjustments, and even limited perception, even the concept of shadow banning, these methods to hinder or to sustain ideas that is not meant to exist on a social platform, which I'd like to say that measures have been taken already on many social networks to inhibit the ability to free speech as well as certain topics under the guise of whether you look at it as fake news or it's not agreed with who they align with. So as long as that is the case, then these networks are not your networks, but you're participating in what they allow to have you. And as you participate, you don't realize you are the product. And at the same time too, your data that you offer and give away freely has shaped and built the very monster, I would say, that is now what these social networks are. Whether you look at it as the big data collection of how much they understand you and how much they can feed you your ads, or how much they can know you so well that they will not only target and enforce you, but collect all this data and build a secondary identity out of you in which it can then serve their own needs and benefits to shape it for you. Whether it's through the manipulation of advertisement or something less nefarious like allowing yourself limitations of your social growth. These both are valid reasons in which these algorithmic methods have limited individuals in the past and continue to do so. So if we are the node and we're building a network, then our allowance of that network is our compliancy. Are we compliant to allow and accept the network of what we are taking in to just broadcast even more, or are we willing to broadcast our own message to see that we have the potential to be our own station, to be our own body, to build and connect our own network? And no differently than any network that exists out there, it does not have to be centralized. The very nature of what decentralization means is to give each individual, each node, each peer the ability to participate and create and have influence on that network. Not by the state of where it will go, but the participation to contribute and not have that be hindered by the very act and nature of what they choose to do on it. And this is seen clearly in peer-to-peer utilities, whether it's through the concept of torrenting, sharing, or even concepts of how we can have open source technologies, whether it's programs or applications. These both are kind of examples that show that the individual itself can not only allow that to be something that can grow even more, but to provide that out there so others can pick up and move forward with it, so that they can see and allow trust to be taken in their system by having a transparency that is not only open, but actually builds the trust necessary so that you yourself can actually use these programs confidently, securely, and with a good faith of knowing that you've sourced your materials from somewhere that is not only caring about you, the individual, but are willing to take the efforts and actions to put that out there through the very works they choose to do. So if that is the case and we're building this network, then whatever solutions that we can create are our own. And the communities that we build are what is going to revolutionize the way that we interact with the world around us, our connection and relationship with the earth, our connection to society, and the way that we are actually forming very unique, I don't want to say cliques, but very unique understandings that individuals will then magnetize and attract themselves towards. Whether it's by the chance of being able to connect with other growers who are having their own food, and then you create your own farmer's market. Or maybe it's the nature of utilizing that each individual house can then become its own farm stand. Both of these options are great solutions in which you use the community and the individual to provide themselves the node to build a network. And that network itself is the solutions that offer not only alternative paths, but even concepts and ideas that are just so foreign to us that we would not have encountered if it was not for the very action of stepping outside the system we've been in for so long. So these are many of the blessings that are kind of ushering in great things, because if you look outside at the world, a receptive programming and the frequencies that we emit are coming from us. So if it is a free will respecting world, then the way that others can have power over us is that we are manipulated, socially engineered, or even through behavioral psychology, are then shifted to either accept or comply to what is external to us. Now, that acceptance of not being able to do something is just as freeing as it is realizing what you can and can't do. Because when we realize who we are, we recognize the relationship dynamic, because then our participation is of our own. So when we're entering into a society that is currently on lockdown, you're seeing what is essentially an isolation of the network. It's taking each and every one and putting them in their own section so that they themselves don't form together. They don't band together. They don't connect. And I think very much the digital world, whether you look at social networks or platforms in general, in the last decade have refined their technology, data collections, and the way that they interact with individuals so that the user product is so unwillingly able to participate, but at the same time too, without even accessing these social platforms, have data collected upon them to shape and build these platforms. You're seeing that where you put your time, energy, and effort towards will be the long term of where you spend your currency, your energy, and your exchange of what your reality is. That breath, that essence of who we are, that participation, it's up to our own self to decide on where that flows. And if we allow that to flow towards, let's say, Amazon, you're only going to support Amazon to grow bigger. And if Amazon is taking away small businesses, then that same action will inherently offer up some sort of feedback in which you will continue to see a collective feeding. And those who are wishing to preserve those small businesses will then either have to submit to alternative practices, such as listing their stuff on Amazon or using an alternative like Google Shop or any of these other methods that are being pushed out there. But we're also recognizing that a lot of these centralized solutions aren't capable of dealing with everyone at an individual level. And on top of that too, we are not able to even give the time of day to recognize or even understand unless you're at an individual level, which is why the importance of decentralization and how each of us can build more communities and connect as individuals are going to usher in these new ways of society. This open source society is very much the answer because we're able to decentralize our finances. And even if you look at the digitalization of the world, whether it's how the cash ban has taken place and now everything's being shifted towards a digital world because of the way that we're not able to interact with one another, so let alone exchange physical goods with one another, whether that is in cash or not. These are going to be challenged, and the digital world and the enforcement of what limits us in this lockdown, in this limitation, these enforced limitations are just as much as an illusion as anything else, because we are allowing ourselves to not understand but to accept what we're told to do rather than to participate and really make a difference. Because if we're just allowing ourselves to comply, then that is allowance. That is allowance that we provide these systems to have power over us. If that's always going to be the case, then that is the life that you were going to live, and that is something that no one else can change besides you. Now, if that world becomes crumbling down and it's no longer there, it is also your responsibility that if you've depended on the system for so long, that you need to step up and change the world that you are living in so that your life means something to you, so that your efforts and energy is recognized for who you are as the individual rather than the cog that you've been playing for so long. And even if you had the concept of you're working towards money or you're working towards this, you have quite the ways to go to understand the very nature of what it means to exist and be human, what it means to live a life, not to go away slaving away and having enough to pay off your debt so that when you die, your debt's paid off. Is that the life you want to live, or are you willing to actually invest in something that exists outside these systems that have garnered nothing but that reality for many? If you ask me, that sounds like something that limits the rights and freedoms of many that I do not agree with and I do not have to accept. And even though I've played a part in attending a college and realizing too late the system that I played and was played by, that these actions can still be used to create lessons and to evolve so that myself and my experience can provide others the opportunity, the clarity of having to learn things the hard way. And I think many of us have lessons that we can each offer one another, but that level of communication is its own topic on its own right. So if we are living in this anti-protest world where we're not able to gather, they're hindering the systems. They're hindering the networks that us as a collective can contribute. No differently than coming together and realizing shit is bullshit. That's called common sense. Why? Because the common affect is that we all can see this and agree upon it. But when the common sense is hijacked in terms of manipulation to be perceptive rather than something of substance, then we're going to accept many of the fallacies that we think is reality, but in exchange and over a period of time of deconstructing it all is merely just the perception to be compliant. Do you want to do that? I don't know. It's not my life. Each their own. But here we are, and what do you want to do about it? I know that China has already began rolling out their digital yuan, and before long, that digital 1 will become a digital 2 and a digital 3, and you'll see these digital currencies exist elsewhere. And I think that in the cryptocurrency world, we've seen technology apply on the blockchain, not by Bitcoin, but by the blockchain itself. The technology of creating a trustless system that acts as a ledger so that when we're dealing with finances, we don't have to put our trust in banks, which make money off their interest loans, but at the same time, too, can embody an amount of money that doesn't actually exist in that building, yet still is stated inside their system. So if that is the case, and that value of currency that is being created through these banks, if that doesn't really exist, and these banks are profiting off of you, where are you benefiting from? And at the same time, too, because we've lived in the system so long that many of these technologies like blockchain will empower individuals to become their own bank, not because they're going to surface into Bitcoin, but because of the technology itself will then reinvent individuals who are familiar with the open source programming world, will then utilize such technologies and advancement to continue development, to continue offering brand new methods and ways of interaction that we can apply and use blockchain ledger technology to not only build trustless systems, but create one of many different avenues in which we can create a form of exchange that is not tied directly to the US dollar, which has currently overtaken the world through its own toxicity and the lack of, I don't know what authenticity it actually has. However you want to look at it. It's printed, it's paper, yet we give so much power away to it. we need to reevaluate our relationship with our exchange, with our goods, with the way we have these systems, and the powers we've given away. That is always going to be the theme here. So even if we're dealing with a digital version of currencies, some of these digital currencies are going to be limited and centralized. But some of us are going to have to exchange into them. But we don't have to keep all our resources and all our value into these systems. That's why the diversification is a decentralized move. Because if we can diversify our own investments, whether you're looking at metals or in your garden, or whether it's in a business or an individual, or even stocking up on food and prepping, these are investments. And investments are there for the long-term haul. If you're realizing that you can be your own bank and you can cut out the middleman of interest rates and you won't get fucked over by the fees and the really fudged up practices that many of these banks and institutions are all conglomerated into, we choose to opt out of the system by participating in a currency or an exchange that is not tied to that. So even if these systems themselves, like let's say Bitcoin, Litecoin, and all these other cryptocurrencies that have existed in the last 8 years, we're looking at what is more on the end of, is this manipulated or is this guided in? Now, when we ask that these types of questions are in place, then we're going to recognize that where we stand, what we apply to Bitcoin is no differently than what we can apply to any social network or digital system altogether. As long as there is a means to manipulate, there will be those who will try to gain from that system. That system could be just as much if a financial institution with lots of investments or lots of ability, or I should say lots of financial obligations or financial investments from other individuals, can then take and invest in these cryptocurrencies. And if you gain enough traction to gather enough, then you can actually have a sway on what occurs towards the price. But if we're looking purely at the price and we're missing the technology, then you're missing the identity in which you are then given the same power away that you did to the dollar to what is entitled by Bitcoin or what any other coin can be created. So it's more about sourcing it, because just as much as the digital currencies exist, they're more just technologies of accessible ledgers that cannot be forged and at the same time too are imprinted. So if that is the case, then we can utilize this technology in the best way to help us rather than hinder us. And I think that's what many of the decentralized movements in cryptocurrencies have done. Most of them are in it for the profit, but I think majority of them are trying to revolutionize a system of finances that we've never seen before, that is truly decentralizing the way that we interact, so that we don't depend on systems, but their systems become something of our own tools that we utilize, so that we not only are responsible of our own nature, but we participate in a manner where the bodies of governments and institutions that we previously have given power towards might not even need to exist anymore. And if this is the direction that we are heading in, then the ability to not only have a say and see this influence the world, but to revolutionize it, then I think there's blessings that can be seen from that. As much as there is rolling out of even robotics and stuff like this augmentation of workforce, of minimal effort but maximum output, we are looking at the ability of recognizing that we can actually work with these technologies to improve a lot of ourselves. But the thing is, if we purely allow these technologies to invade our lives and we lose touch with the natural world, then that also will provide ourselves with the lessons by learning from going out of balance. And I think as much as we need to have the natural world, I think we utilize a lot of the technologies that allows us to connect. Even the concept of technology itself, a quartz crystal, which is created in nature itself, was able to create and emit frequencies back and forth between two individual devices in which a communication phone call can take place, or the radio can emit and broadcast its media. And we take this for granted because we don't truly understand the nature of reality. And when we look at the digital world, there is a nature that this digital world, it holds just as much value and weight to the individual's emotions as does the real world events. So many of the things that we go through in the digital world hold merit by experience, which is why these things and these topics are just as much being brought to the conscious awareness, because we need to have the conversations. We need to honestly work with what's going on, but also deconstruct it to not only put ourselves in good positions, but to be aware so that we can build solid foundations that are long lasting, so that the foundations that have previously gone from the generations that have put us here, not only can we watch them decay, but we can actually plant something new in its place. And instead of pouring concrete, let's make this something that is going to birth a forest for generations so that it is sustainable, so that when the seeds are planted and the tree grows and it fruits and creates more seeds, those seeds can then land in fertile ground rather than be tossed aside and then discarded. So if we're going to create this new world, then it takes the effort and energy, focus and intention, and willingness and passion to create that. It's going to come at an individual stance, and it's going to come gradually. It's a back and forth of trial and error, and if we all participate at our own pace, then even contributing even the small step can hit an inspiration that connects bridges towards nations and individuals that was previously so challenged and so held back, that such revelations and innovations will not only game change everything, but put us in positions where we can look back and realize how come we did not do that sooner. So, with everything in mind and the gestation of shadow banning society from participating in what's going on or allowing them to have a say is putting us in an uncomfortable position where many of us are going to speak up, just as myself here, able to assess the situation, express my ideas out there in the world, and provide not only a good understanding of what's going on, but ways that we can not only overcome it, see the silver lining blessings, but then apply ourselves forward and recognize that the true power lies within. So these lessons here today that this Contactless 3-part series has, I guess, turned into, we're using this as a vehicle for a message. And if you feel strongly about this message, then that's something that I think we are all building and we're all seeing as a note that actually resonates. Even if we don't pick that up, we see that it's close to the chord, even if it's slightly out of tune, because each of us are drawn towards it, even magnetization. I'm sure we'd like to be in positions where we have gardens in our backyards, but what it takes to be a good gardener is experience and the know-how. And without that, many of us are going to be stepping into new modalities of life and new practices that we're going to have to learn over a period of time and experience. And to get started sooner is the season starting, so that when the new season comes around or when the new year comes around, the lessons we learned from the last year can then be taken into consideration. So new actions or preparations or precautions can be taken so that what we choose to manifest from there forward can do so at the best and efficient way that we as individuals can provide out into the world. So with all that said, I think we dive pretty much into the depth of the technologic world, the ways in which we're also having an uncomfortable relationship to recognize, as well as the value and weight in which we put into these digital worlds as much as we do in the real world. And illusions that we set up are not our external forces, but that of the internal projections. So if we decide to take our own power back, then the systems that we've depended on they don't have to exist, and we can be the systems. We can be the ones, the nodes that allow our network to strive and to be something more. And it is up to us to create that network. And those networks can exist simultaneously to the same systems that are decaying. So don't let this be demotivating because of everything that's going on out there, or maybe the world out there, or feeling powerless, because one day at a time, I think all of us can get through stuff. And I think we're in a period where we need to reflect and get our shit clear, so that when we can do and act in our rightful mind, in our rightful actions, we not only are moving forward with clarity, but we're doing so from a place where, like I said, foundations are real. They're legitimate and they're fertile for generations to come. That's where we want to be, and that's the type of relationship that I think we need to develop with the world, whether it's through the earth and nature or by the individual network. These are keys in which are going to open up the doors to a society which has been locked down. And if you feel strongly about this, then allow that message to be shared. But I think most of this is going to happen on an application per use basis. So it's the individual showing by example that this can be done is going to be the opportunity in which art itself has grown as this practice in which we can see ideas grow, concepts take form, and even ways and new movements not only take place but become inspired through the very actions that have come before it. And just as much as the art world going through so many different phases, we will see humanity and society itself go through so many different phases as it discovers itself and realizes what it feels in tune to express. So without that, I think this is going to give us the opportunity to not only test, but even if we put up with a lot of the hacking of, let's say, having these systems tested, or these new nodes and networks tested, they're going to provide us no differently than crop failure. If the weather hits us and we're getting freezing temperatures in May and our crops are pretty much going to be wiped from that, then it's up to that lesson learned to provide protection. And if you want to know more about that, tune into my previous video about greenhouse thinking in the long spring, because we need to take actions of being aware of our situations so that we can enact the best solutions for those moments present. So thank you for tuning in, and as always, stay true.